So we are about to talk about one of the most controversial topics in bass fishing, bed fishing. I absolutely love bed fishing, but I know it's not PC for a lot of people, but it's something that is here to stay, and it is something that is never gonna go away. So today I'm gonna talk about the only bed fishing baits you need, and I'm gonna break down some of the key things you need to know about bed fishing. So stick around, you guys are not gonna wanna miss this video. So I know people hate bed fishing. There's a lot of people that do, but I absolutely love it. It's one of my absolute favorite things. If you're a tournament angler, there's not many times you can go say, I'm gonna go to this 5-pounder, this 5-pounder, this 6-pounder, this 4-pounder, with certainty, knowing there's gonna be a fish there. Most of the time it's speculation, right? But in bed fishing, you know that's what's gonna happen because those fish are there. The only struggle is getting them to eat. And if you're like I am up north, smallmouth are probably one of your favorite things to catch when they're on a bed because they're super, super dumb. So the first thing I'm gonna talk about is my favorite baits for largemouth and smallmouth. Spotted bass, it's a shaky head, I'm gonna throw it right out the window. But my favorite baits for largies and smallies on beds. And then after that, what I'm gonna do is kind of break down how I go about approaching a bed. For you tournament guys, I will add a couple tips to help keep you from wasting 7 hours on a fish. And then I'll just talk about some general bed fishing hows or do's and don'ts. So the first thing we'll do is we'll talk about largemouth because that seems to be what the majority of people fish for. And the first baits that I'm gonna talk about, a Wacky Rig is number one. I can't beat it. Some sort of finesse worm is gonna be absolutely key because the first thing that you need to know about bed fishing is the easiest bed fish to catch are the ones that don't know you're there. So if you can bomb a cast 15 feet before that fish even knows you're there, you're gonna catch that fish probably like first cast 10 times out of 10 because it's guarding a bed. So that's what you need to know first. But finesse worm, you gotta have it. The next bait is gonna be some sort of Texas rigged beaver. I like a Z-Man palmetto bug because the Elastec makes it float and then I can get there and just sit there and make it shiver. One thing to note about a Texas rig, what I like to do is I actually keep the eye of my hook partly exposed from my bait because it rattles when my tungsten weight hits it. And that's a Fish USA tungsten weight. I'll have all the gear linked down below like I always do. But as you shake it, it gets that bait to rattle. That's one thing that's super, super cool that a lot of people don't know and I didn't know about until I was watching underwater footage. But that is the workhorse. That's gonna be the go-to. I like to catch them with the Wacky Rig or a finesse worm before I get there. If I see them, bam, that's gonna be where I do most of my work. If they are really picky, there is one bait that is ridiculously hard to beat, and that's a drop shot. But not just any drop shot. It is a drop shot rigged with a finesse Kitech swim bait. So this is a Z-Man one, I have one sitting right here, but I like a Kitech 2.8. That is the best tough drop shot or tough bed fishing bait out there. Because what happens is I put a short lead on it, only about 3 inches, and what I do is when I pitch it in there with about an 1/8 ounce weight, it swims down to the bottom, and those fish key in on that swimming action. You can swim it past them, and they get so conditioned to seeing bait fish swim past them constantly that when you swim that little swim bait by there, they just eat it. And it's like super, super instinctive for them. But those are the only 3 bed fishing baits that I actually will ever use because you need to have a bait for far away and then 2 close baits, and that's gonna be it. I don't try to go over the top with it. If you're in Florida, maybe a prop bait or a frog would be a little bit more, but really, those are the only baits that you need. For smallmouth, it's even simpler. There's 2. There's a drop shot and a Ned Rig. And the reason I have a drop shot and a Ned Rig is because sometimes if you're smallmouth fishing on beds, they will suspend. And what I'll do is I'll pitch the Ned Rig in first because generally my hook percentage is the highest with a Ned Rig, just for me. And so when I pitch that Ned Rig in there first, what it does is I can see how they react to it. If they don't go down to it, then I know they're not gonna eat it. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll just stay elevated above the bed, and that's how I know they're gonna eat a drop shot. And generally 9 times out of 10, they will eat the drop shot first cast. After I will work them over with a Ned Rig for 5 minutes and they won't even touch it. You'll pitch a drop shot in there first cast, they eat it. You can have a Ned Rig on a drop shot like I have right here, and it doesn't matter. They'll still eat it like first cast because they want that elevation. Same thing goes when you're fishing a drop shot. You might fish a drop shot for 5 minutes and then all of a sudden you switch to a Ned Rig, first cast, they eat it. It's just how they are. They're weird like that. But those are the only 2 baits that I use for that. Spotted bass, I love a shaky head because spotted bass like to spawn out a little bit deeper and you can cast it up there and kind of drag it around. You know, most of the time when you're fishing for smallmouth and it's clear water, you're over top of them looking at them, so that's not that big of an issue. The next thing that I want to talk about is some do's and don'ts that are general for bed fishing. The first thing is never block the fish's escape. If I'm fishing for a fish and it's being particularly tough, like it doesn't want to stay on the bed, reposition your boat. Move it to the other side of that fish. Generally, they'll come lock right on. It's generally how it goes. They just don't like your boat in some places. I never try to block their escape route, because if you watch a fish, they usually have one way they like to go when they're leaving their bed. When you spook them off, they'll generally go to one spot, sit there for a minute, come back, or do a loop one way. Never block that. Let them have that. The other thing is, if you're not sure if the fish has it, don't set the hook. Those fish, if you don't set the hook, will come back and pick it up again and again and again, because there's no negative repercussions of it. So if you're not sure, just leave them swim off with it, let them drop it. A lot of times I'll do that the first couple of times if they're real easy, just so they get accustomed to eating it, so that way they'll eat it better. Now, if it's a really tough fish, that's a little bit different story. Sometimes you have to like pop the bait in order to get them to eat it, but that's besides the point. The other thing is, make sure you have good glasses. These are, I think these are Waterland Millikins. I like these, they're an amber lens. They're a little bit brighter for when it's darker out, but I love the Bedfisher series. The Bedfisher series in a dark blue lens for when it's really, really sunny out really make beds pop extremely well, and I'll have a discount code down below you guys can use to get yourself a pair of those if you're looking for new glasses, but that's extremely important. The other thing to note about bedfish is they have a spot they love on the nest. If your nest is this big, there's gonna be one spot that they like to sit on, and that's because that's where the eggs are. They will have a spot on the bed, and then they will have a spot off the bed. Now, there's no eggs off of the bed, but they just like that spot. And so you can catch them on either spot. Most of the time it's the bed, but sometimes you can catch them where they're going to also. And so the key is, you'll notice the fish's reaction change as soon as you find that spot. Now, as far as getting fish to bite, when you're fishing to a fish, a lot of times if you can catch them further away, like I said, you're more beneficial. If they don't see you, you're gonna catch that fish almost 10 times out of 10. We got some waves coming up right here, so you're gonna see me rock around a little bit. Now, if you get to the position where you are having to look at the fish, I like to position my boat as close as I need to, but as far away as I can. So as close as you need to be able to see it, but as far away as you physically can, because that's gonna make that fish a lot more comfortable and oftentimes get them to eat a little bit faster. So once you find that spot, there's a couple different things you can do when you find that one finesse spot that fish doesn't like. You can shake it. I've seen the cook quiver where he hits his rod. I like to just shake my rod because it gets that bait to flare. The other thing I like to do is bump the fish with the bait. What I will do is flip it on the other side, bring it up to him, and kind of shake it as I'm getting up to him, because a lot of times they'll snap it. Another thing you can do is pop the bait when you get it close to them. That's what's gonna be called a shock bite. The problem with a shock bite, this is a last resort for me, because if they shock bite, a lot of times they're gonna be barely hooked. So if I can get them to eat it while I'm just shaking it, I'm gonna be way better off. But a shock bite is also something that I will do if I need to. Now, I love to be able to cast over something and be able to yo-yo it on the bed, but that's only if it's in vegetation. Other times, there's really nothing else you can do about it. But it's all about reading that fish's aggression depending on where you're at, finding that key spot, and then trying to hammer it home on that key spot. And you'll figure out little fish or little things that each fish doesn't like, because every bed fish is completely different, but the baits stay the same. For you tournament guys, there is one tidbit I want to talk about. If you find yourself bed fishing, turn your graphs off. When you get locked onto a bedfish, shut your electronics off. The only graph that I leave on is a mapping graph that doesn't have any sonar pinging. I will have my back off, not off, but rest mode. I will have those on rest mode. I will have all of my graphs on the front rest mode except that one, so there is no pinging whatsoever, so that way that fish doesn't hear any of that pinging, because I promise you they hear it. And it calms them down a lot better. The other thing that I leave that mapping unit on for is I give myself a time frame. And it depends on the circumstance that I'm in, but if it's first fish of the morning, I usually give myself about 20 minutes. If I can't get that fish to bite or even look like it's gonna bite in 20 minutes, I'm out. And the time changes depending on the situation that I'm in. If I have 5 fish and I'm sitting on a 7-pounder, I might spend the rest of the day there just trying for it, because I think it's my best opportunity. But give yourself time parameters to know when to leave and force yourself to follow it, because if you don't, you'll end up wasting a lot more time on those fish than you ever thought possible. The key to knowing when to stay and when to go is the size circles that fish makes and how fast it comes back. So if you spook that fish off and it takes 5 or 6 seconds, and then you spook it off again and it takes 4 seconds, you'll get to a point where it'll start turning on a dime, and that's how you know that fish is catchable. If it's coming back faster and faster. If it's not getting faster and faster, if that fish is going away for like 10-15 seconds, coming back and then going away for 10-15 seconds, that fish is gonna be really, really hard to catch. And so you have to understand that going into it. But the key is to get those loops tighter and tighter and tighter until that fish doesn't leave the bed. That's what you really need to do. But hopefully this helps you guys out bed fishing wise. I know it's not PC, but it's something I love, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Just be responsible with it when you're doing it. If you're fun fishing, don't live well your fish, put your fish back, so that way they're not getting, you know, beat up, and they can actually go back and guard their nest. A lot of you guys don't know, I actually have a fishery science background, so I know all of the damaging things that bed fishing can do when done wrong. But I also love to tournament fish, so if I find an 8-pounder on a bed, I'm gonna catch it in the tournament, or attempt to. The Bible quote I will leave you guys with today is, there are 2 roads in life that you can lead. There is a broad, wide road that is easy to walk, and that is the road that leads to destruction. And then there is a narrow road that is more difficult. That is the road that gets you home. That's the road that gets you to salvation. Meaning, the path that is easiest is not always the right path. Sometimes you need to take the road less traveled to be able to get where you need to go. So think about that when you're living your day-to-day life. The easy things are not always the best things for you, whether that be treating people rudely, whether that be, you know, trying to pray every night. I know I struggle with something like that. Like, it's not always easy, guys, but it's something that I think we need to do more often as a culture and as a people. But God bless you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.